Watch for Me on the Mountain by Forrest Carter, Chapter 3. The sun tilted, changing its light rays, filtering through the earth haze and playing with the colors of the canyon walls. Rock streaks of green melted subtly into blues. Pink pastels darkened into reds, and sandstone yellows spread liquidly like paint, mixing and changing with the delicate brush of light. Tana and his wife, Watashi, sat cross-legged on the canyon floor, their backs to the southern wall of narrow shade. Boto returned from his scouting to the east, the way the soldiers would come. He sat down by the side of Watashi, resting his rifle across his knees. From his loose blouse he took 3 husks. Placing one between his lips, he politely passed the others to Watashi and Tanya. And striking a sulfur match on his cartridge belt, he lit their cigarillos. They breathed and held the smoke for a long interval before releasing it, luxuriating in the soothing assurance. Watashi and Tana had closed their eyes, and Boto watched the colors changing on the opposite canyon wall. He was a man in his prime. Beneath the war band, his face was firm, strong, and his legs above the boot moccasins showed sinewy muscles. "Tana," he addressed the old man without looking. "Yes." Tana did not open his eyes. "You know the soldiers better. You were with Nana and Victorio. When do you think they will come?" "I have thought on it," Tana said. "At the counting this morning, Chato would tell them first, before they discovered. But they will be confused in the beginning. They will think perhaps that Geronimo has gone to Hoyo Caliente." Tana drew smoke from his cigarillo. Boto considered the old man's answer. "But," Boto argued, "Naish has said that Geronimo told Chato we were going to the Sierra Madre." Tana laughed. "Yes, Geronimo is cunning. He thinks twice, maybe 3 times. He knows Chato. When Chato tells the soldiers first, they will think it is true. Then they will argue among themselves and say Geronimo is treacherous. They will say Geronimo knew Chato would tell, and so he is going to Hoyo Caliente instead of the Sierra Madre. Then they will argue some more. They will, in the end, ride in circles around and around until they find our tracks. I think." Tana paused and glanced quickly at the sun. "They will be here when the sun begins to turn red. It will be a little while." He thought on what he had said and laughed low. "Geronimo makes them work like a burro instead of thinking like the eagle." A breeze touched the sand floor and was gone. I walked the length our guns will carry," Boto said, patting the rifle. "There is no place, no boulder behind which they can hide. They must go back a long way when we shoot." "Yes," Tana answered. "Geronimo did well to pick this place." Now there were light shadows flickering in the colors of the canyon walls, as though a shadowy land, etching faintly with gray, feverishly erased its etchings only to draw again. A cliffhawk sailed smoothing down the canyon. Feeling a slight cooling caused by the slanting of the sun's rays, he came from the plains to search out snakes and rodents, soon to be moving among the rock crevices. Swooping before them, he screamed at their presence and sailed to the canyon rim to perch and consider them. Tana said, "He has left the desert early, too soon. Perhaps something there has caused him to leave. Boto stood erect. Yes, the hawk has come to call us. Watashi struggled, slow in rising to stand with Boto and Tana. Boto motioned to the wall opposite them. I will take this side if, he looked questioningly at Tana. You think it better that I go first, grandfather? He used the old term of respect. Yes, grandson, Tana answered. Your testing will come while it is still light. You have the strength of the wolf and can move quickly. He laughed, slapping at his crooked leg. Watashi and me, we cannot move fast, but in the night after you are gone, we have the hearing. Our ears will help us in the dark like the coyote. Watashi touched the arm of Boto, sliding her hand down to hold his strong hand in her old one. Grandson, she said softly, when we were born, we chose to put our spirit bodies into these bodies and to test our spirits and make them stronger. If we win the tests, now we will be born again back into our spirit bodies. It is good and we will be together. Excuse me. Impulsively, Boto squeezed her hand and looked into the old watering eyes. Yes, he said shyly. I believe this. When Geronimo hugged me, he said, he had seen the other side, and it is good for the strong spirits, for they are in the light. We will be together. He left them, walking across the canyon's floor. The hawk flapped upward and sailed further down the canyon. He placed his hand searching for the first hole on the wall and turned to face the old couple standing watching him. He remembered the centuries-old goodbye of the Apache, sure of death. It is a good day for dying, he called softly. They smiled at his remembering and answered him. It is a good day for dying. And the canyon's echo of the words was soft, sighing with a peaceful reassurance, a comforting authority that this was so. Tana tore a strip from his blouse and tied the rifle around his neck. He pulled Watashi ahead of him up the wall. She was light, and if he had gone first and his old leg failed, she could not have held him. She was slow in her movements, but sure, not slipping. Halfway up, she found a sandstone ridge that angled toward the top and towed her moccasins deftly in the crevice. Tana followed, pulling himself over the top of the wall directly behind her. They lay for a moment, panting. Tana looked down the way they had come. The canyon floor was far below them, a white strip of narrow sand between the walls. He was pleased with the rocks and the boulders here, a good place. But their perch was only a narrow ledge, for almost immediately the mountains rose upward, steep and bouldered. When the soldiers came to kill them, that was where they would hide, up there, and shoot down on their ledge. It could not be helped. They must lie close to the canyon's edge. Across the canyon they could see Boto's head. He had settled himself in the place he had chosen behind two boulders. Tana and Watashi waved and saw the hand of Boto lift in answer. Behind Boto's narrow ledge, the mountains rose too with heavy boulders. The boulders made shadows now, lengthening. Where the sun touched them, they were red. Tana rose and walked among the rocks, searching for the place he must have. He found it a little farther up the canyon, but close to the edge. A big rock sheltered them from sight across the canyon. Before them, two boulders formed a V through which they could see the way the soldiers would come. Tana lay down and Watashi lay beside him. Excuse me. The rocks still held their heat, but the air cooled with the sun's rays lessening slant. Tana lay on his stomach, his rifle before him. Watashi studied the old face, dark and lined, sagging cheeks wrinkling downward. They'd been together since they were very young. A snake rustled in the rocks, moving away from their presence. "Tana," whispered Watashi. She knew a voice tone would carry far. "Yes," Tana said, not moving his eyes from the canyon. "You remember Hoyo Caliente with the water spring and the pinyon grove?" "Yes." "Where our children are buried?" "I remember," Tana said. Watashi smoothed the faded calico of her sleeve. "When we go, you may go first. I will follow. We will meet Boto. If we are separated, we can meet there by the children." Tana took his eyes from the canyon, looking into her own. A smile creased the lines of his face. "Yes, Watashi, we will meet there. I will remember and put it in my spirit mind. We will meet there," he reassured her, placing his hand over her tiny one. "I will do this too," she said simply, and satisfied lay beside him, watching the way the soldiers would come down the canyon. The shadows lengthened and narrowed the lighted sand strip of canyon floor. They sensed the coming. It was before their ears heard it, a slow pulsating of air, a rhythm that was slow. Watashi saw Tana stiffen, and she too felt the air rhythm on her senses. Excuse me. The sun was a red ball behind them. Its light sifting through dust particles spread a red haziness over them and into the canyon. The redness deepened. Now a sound touched their ears, muffled and shuffling in sand, but ominous in its depth. There were many horses, far ahead where the canyon bent. Watashi saw them. Even with her age-watered eyes, she could make out walking horses. They came around the bend. More and more of them came. There was no ending to the line. Now she could see figures on the horses. Riders were coming directly toward them, and the lead horses were strung out, not ridden abreast like soldiers' mounts. They were Indians. "Excuse me, scouts," Tana whispered. "Papago, and some are Apache." Watashi could see them now. The Papagos wore their hair short and had hats on their heads. The Apaches wore war bands, holding their bush hair in place. Cartridge belts crossed their breasts. They rode slowly, studying the sand. Behind them came the soldiers, riding three abreast. Watashi could see the sun make red sparkles on their metalled guns. The soldiers rode 200 yards behind the Indian scouts, cautious of ambush. The dark line of soldiers lengthened toward them, passing through shadows cast by the walls. Still they came around the bend, more soldiers than Watashi had ever seen. The scouts were close now. One of them looked up, scanning the canyon rim. Watashi looked away from him. He would know if she watched him closely. The lead scout was Papago. He was watching the ground, hat shadowing his face. A rifle startled the quietness, booming. The Papago instantly threw his hands wide, hat tumbling. His horse broke into a run and he tumbled backward dead. An Apache riding behind him whirled his horse about. Before the echoes died, the rifle boomed again, hitting the Apache between his shoulders, knocking him over the horse's neck. The horse, startled by the sound, reared and bucked the Apache into the sand. Boto had begun his ordeal. Shouting came from the soldiers. Above their confusion, an officer's command rang out. They turned their mounts, retreating back down the canyon. The Indian scouts were scrambling their horses, following the soldiers. One had jumped from his horse. Holding the reins, he backed against the canyon wall, almost directly below Tana and Watashi. The soldiers had halted, disciplined, halfway down the canyon. They faced about, watching the dismounted scout. He was looking, scanning the canyon top from where the shots came. Now he shouted, "Yehoo!" and pointed to Boto's hiding place. As he pointed, Boto rose in the rocks, aiming his rifle. The shot boomed and the scout was flung against the wall. He died slumping to the sand. His horse, released, drummed down the canyon westward. The thunder of the shot made rolling echoes that followed the horse farther and farther away. There was heavy silence. Watashi and Tanya saw Boto now. He was climbing a huge boulder on the canyon's edge. He reached the top in sight of the soldiers. For a moment he stood motionless, skylined before the red ball of setting sun. His hair was whipped by the wind. Slowly he raised the rifle with one hand above his head. As he shook the rifle for all to see, a sound began deep in his throat, and rising from far away, scaled to the high-pitched scream. "Ee-yaw!" The war cry of the Apache. The scream bounced, echoing fiercely between the walls. The blue line of soldiers rippled in movement. Boto lowered the rifle and turned his face to the sky like a wolf, savage and mournful. "Hi-ya-wah!" The death call. The Apache scouts would know, and so would tell the blue-coat chief. They go this way. They must kill the Apache. There was no other way to pass him. He would fight and die. Watashi thrilled at the cry and saw Tana's figure shiver on the ground. The soldiers dismounted and stood against the wall with rifles. Shouted commands floated up the canyon to them. A group of soldiers and Indian scouts mounted horses and drummed back toward the east, searching for a place to climb the wall. Watashi saw Boto descend from the boulder, but he did not leave the ledge. He did, however, change his position, moving closer to the soldiers. He rose above the rocks, aiming his rifle. He fired toward the soldiers, sending them scrambling farther back along the canyon. The reverberating sounds had not died when he fired again and again. Tana turned to Watashi. "Boto does well. He has added many steps to the women and children, following Geronimo." "Yes," Watashi said. "I can hear them running. They are running far. Boto is giving them many steps. The soldiers must wait." Excuse me. The sun slipped behind the mountain crags, flaming the sky and bringing shadow in the rocks. Slowly the sky flame died, taking away its light. The first star appeared, blinking wakefulness in the east. Tana gripped Watashi's hand. "See," he whispered, "they are coming." Watashi strained, watching the darkening rocks across the canyon. Then she saw first one figure quickly outlined before melting behind a boulder, then another and another. They were moving toward Boto's place on the ledge. Circling, they were coming down the mountainside. Suddenly a rifle cracked and another. A volley of rifles opened up. Tana chuckled. "They are searching for Boto, but he will not answer and tell them where he is. They must come closer and pay for their knowledge." As Tana spoke, a Papago scout leaped atop a boulder and shot down at the ledge. He was answered immediately by Boto's rifle. Slumping, his gun clattered loud in the stillness. The scout rolled from the boulder. Before his body came to rest, the rifles set up a deafening roar, firing repeatedly at the place of Boto's muzzle flash. Watashi and Tana saw the figure rise from the ledge rocks. It was Boto. He staggered, stumbling, and fell just as the rifle volley spoke again. From where he had fallen, his rifle answered back. Again he stood. This time he fired before the rifles hit him, turning him as he fell. Now there was quiet. Cautiously the figures moved, bending behind rocks as they came toward Bodo. Then boldly standing over him from where he lay, Bodo's rifle cracked, striking upward at the figures over him. One of them toppled, sliding in the rocks. This time the soldiers' rifles fired long and continuously where he lay. After a time they melted back into the shadows and drifted along the ledge toward the east. "Boto is gone," Watashi whispered. "Yes." Tana raised his rifle, placing it between the two rocks, pointing it toward the soldiers. Dusk slipped away, retreating toward the west. A tide of stars advanced out of the east, bringing silver light to the canyon. The sand floor beneath Watashi and Tana shone white. Far off, a coyote yelped, high, tenor-voiced. The mountains echoed hollow. There was stillness. Tana pulled cartridges from the belt and laid them by his hand. He said, "They are coming." The canyon whispered with a stirring of air that many bodies make in their moving, a creak of leather, a muffled sound of horses' hoofs striking sand. The scouts were separated this time, riding closer to the canyon walls, keeping to the shadows. Tana picked the lead scout across the white floor. He fired. The scout fell backwards with the rifle crack. Hastily, Tana worked the breech and pushed in another cartridge. The scouts had turned their horses. Tana shot, and a horse fell screaming. Again the shouting of commands. Tana began a steady firing toward the soldiers, filling the canyon with echoes, following echoes until it seemed a dozen rifles were shooting. The sounds of horses and men moved further away. The silence came again. Tana sat up, watching for signs of life. There were none. Starlight deepened the seams in his face. His eyes glittered beneath the warband. "Boto gave us good night cover. Now we will use it." Watashi nodded. She knew Tana was a great warrior. His old and wrinkled body was scarred in many places. Guns of the soldiers had crippled his leg. He had been a warrior with Nana and with Victorio. He'd fought the Star Chief Carlton and Gray Wolf Crook of the Bluecoats, the soldiers' chiefs of Mexico, Terrazas and Trevino. He would use the darkness. He stood, pulling Watashi up beside him. "Look," he said, and opened the rifle breech, placing a cartridge in it. He cocked the rifle, easing the hammer into place. He handed her the rifle. "Now you must do this. Take out the bullet. Put it back in the rifle." Watashi fumbled with the gun. She managed to do as he had instructed. He took the rifle from her, slipped the cartridge belt over his shoulder. "I will go to meet them along the ledge. You will hear me shooting." Then he pointed up to the mountainside crowding above them. "I will run up there. I will shoot at them from the mountainside. While they are shooting at the mountainside, I will come back here. I will leave the rifle for you and go back to the mountain. I will let them see me up there, but it will take a while before they can find me." In this way, he turned his face toward the stars, speculating, "We will make them use more time." Watashi nodded. He embraced her briefly, and she laid her head on his chest, long hair silvering in the moonlight. Releasing her, he was gone, limping across the rocks. Watashi sat down, smoothing the billowing calico dress that fell to her ankles. She had always loved him, fully, finding even the little things to love, the weakness and the faults. They had become one, growing together over a long time, and now they were to share this short time, she and Tana giving steps to the women and the children. She would have to move quickly in the rocks when she had the gun. Excuse me. She stood and pulled the calico dress over her head, dropping it to the ground. Except for the boot moccasins, she was naked. Far down the ledge, a rifle cracked. It was Tana, again now, answered by a staccato of rifle fire. Again the single rifle shot, this time closer. When the soldiers' guns answered, she could see the spouts of flame. Tana was moving up the mountain above her. A long silence. A coyote yelped. He was answered by another and another. Watashi thought, stupid papagos. Tanya knows they are not coyotes. Why don't they shout at each other? They are yelping so each will know where the other is, so they will not shoot each other. She nodded knowingly in the moonlight. One of the yelps would be Tana's. He would join their game and they would be confused, not shoot at his place. A pebble fell rattling on the rocks. It was near her and she pressed close against the boulder. In front of her a shadow fell on the ground. It grew larger. The owner of the shadow was crawling up the boulder directly above her. From far up the mountain a lone shot spouted flame. The shadow rose, stiffening. Watashi looked up as the papago screamed, losing his balance and falling straight-bodied over the canyon wall. Tana has been watching over me, Watashi thought, but now they will know where he is. Oh, this is a long chapter. Rifles chattered along the mountain, making tiny flames that sputtered in the shadows. They were moving toward Tana's place. She strained to listen when the guns quieted, but could not hear him. He slipped through the rocks and was before her, pulling the cartridge belt from his shoulder and laying the rifle on the ground. Neither spoke as their eyes met, and he was gone. He moved low, crouching, dragging the crippled leg heavily, and when Watashi picked up the rifle, it was wet with blood. He would show himself now. She watched the mountain, dappled in the shadows of boulders. Somewhere a heavy rock crashed, and guns volleyed at the sound. Tana had tossed the rock. Then she saw him, far away from where the rock had fallen. He had raised himself in full view, standing on the boulder in the light. Suddenly he collapsed, throwing his body from the boulder as rifles opened on him. They did not shoot him, Watashi thought. Tana is wilier than a coyote. When the rifles had fired this time, they were closer together in a half ring, moving in. When the last rifle shot died, the coyote yelping began again. They were moving up the mountain. Then, "Hi-hi-yo!" Mournful and long, the cry carried hauntingly into the stillness. It was Tana, and it was the death cry. This time the rifles did not stop firing as the flame torches moved closer together and joined into a ring. For a long time they boomed and cracked and echoed. There was a silence, then the shouts. Tana was gone. Watashi slipped cartridges from the belt and placed them in her mouth. The cartridge belt was heavy. She would not need many bullets. She crouched, waiting. She could hear them now coming down the mountain. They were talking. Rocks fell and rattled as they approached the ledge, coming directly toward the small clearing where she crouched. Now she could see them, a dark bunching of men. They wore hats shadowing their faces in the starlight. Bold and confident, they talked loudly. One of them laughed. Something was scuffing over the ground, loosing pebbles. They were dragging Tana's body. From the shadow of her boulder, Watashi saw clearly now as they came into the ledge. Two of them held Tana's feet, pulling him on his back, and the lifeless head bobbed and bounced over the stones. Now they were on the ledge in full sight. The tallest of them stepped to the rim of the ledge and, looking up the canyon, wigwagged his arms in the starlight, a sign to the bluecoats that all was clear. As he swung his arms, he shouted the signal to them. "Hee-yaw!" Watashi raised the rifle on her knee and sighted between the shoulders of the shouting man. She fired. The rifle explosion boomed in her ears, deafening her, but she heard the man's shout instantly became a scream. He pitched headlong into the canyon. That would tell the bluecoats, Watashi thought. The canyon was not clear. They could not pass. With the booming of the rifle, the dark knot of men instantly melted into the boulder's deeper shadows. They left Tana's body lying on the ledge. Watashi could see the face turned up toward the stars. There was a deep stillness. She reloaded the rifle, sliding in the cartridge, careful to muffle the click of the breech. She felt a great calm. Her hands were sure and deft. Here on the ledge, the air was still, but far below her in the canyon she could hear wind. At first she was alarmed, for the wind rippled and pattered, and she thought it might be the bluecoats trying to pass, but it was not the sound of horses or of men running in the sand. Then she knew it was the wind bringing back to her the sound of the women and children. Running. They were still running, following Geronimo. She smiled slowly in the darkness of the boulders, and a deep comfort came over her. Faintly to her right, she heard a stone turn, and with the born instinct of an Apache warrior, she moved backwards, rapidly and silently, to escape being surrounded. But she would not move away from the ledge. She could not give up the ledge. She paused, listening, trusting her ears. Cloth slithered faintly on rock. The sound was in front of her. She had beaten their circle. Now the contest would be their eyes against hers. She half raised in the shadow a huge boulder and bent her body forward in an unnatural, grotesque position. In the illusion of light and shadow, the eye searches for the symmetrical lines of the human body, not the grotesque outlines of rock outcroppings. She waited. Far away down the canyon, a blue-coat officer shouted. She could not understand his words that echoed hollow and angry. Watashi smiled again. The white-eyed chief was impatient. In answer to the shout, a shadow grew quickly atop a boulder, anxious to please the officer and have done with the ambush. The shadow grew lumpy and moving. The scout was crawling. Watashi laid her cheek on the rifle and waited patiently for her swaying sights to cross the figure. The sights wavered, moving back and forth. In the center of the shadow now, she squeezed the trigger. Flame reached for the scout not 10 yards from her, and with the echoing boom of the rifle, the figure half rose clear in the starlight. The head flopped against the rock, knocking a hat cartwheeling across the ledge and into the canyon. The figure jerked and twisted and gurgled, rolling from the boulder, striking loose shell from the ledge rock. The body of the scout slid noiselessly across the ledge and dropped from sight over the edge. Watashi listened, but could not hear the body striking the canyon floor. A small avalanche of shale rattled hollowly, following the body into the canyon. She knew she had caught them moving. If they had seen her muzzle fire, they would have shot. But they knew their encirclement had missed. They would widen now, coming in behind her. Carefully, she opened the breech and inserted another cartridge. She knew Tana was hovering near her, watching. She could see his body lying 50 yards ahead of her on the ledge. "See, Tana, Boda," she whispered to herself. "I am helping too. All the great bluecoats still cannot move." The stillness was so heavy that her own whisper startled her. Faintly far away in the canyon, so dim that it seemed a memory, she could hear the light patter of wind, carrying the sound of the footsteps. The women and children running behind Geronimo. For a moment she listened dreamily to the sound. The patter made a rhythm, the wind carried a melody. It was a song. And the song was beautiful, reassuring. Quietly, a wisdom thought came into her mind. This time I will not be afraid when I am born into the spirit body, as I was when I was born into the earth body. I fought then, thinking that to be born here was death. It was not, only a visit. I will not be afraid. She shook her head, flopping the long white hair around her shoulders. She must move, but where? Slowly, painfully on the shale, she began crawling toward Tana. Carefully lifting the rifle and placing it down before her, she inched forward, making no sound. Close to her, right in the boulders, a whisper sound came very near. It was a moccasin sliding over rock. She paused, turning her head toward the rocks. Too late. The man stood above her in full view, his rifle already pointed. He fired, and the flame leaped down at her. She felt the shock, but there was no pain. The blow tumbled her across the ledge, losing the rifle. Frantically, she grabbed at the loose shale, at first searching for the rifle and then seeing the edge of the canyon's lip sliding perilously close. She held herself from falling into the canyon. The man leaped toward her. A long knife blinked in the starlight. On her back, looking up, she could see the man clearly in the air, leaping. His face was shadowed by a hat, but she could see his teeth bared by his lips drawn back in the effort. He came down on her, spread eagle, and plunged the knife. She did not feel it, only a faint tap as if someone had nudged her with a stick. He rose to his knees, astraddled her body. Now she could see the knife handle sticking up from her chest. Instinctively, her foot came up between his legs, searching, and found the crotch. She was lying with her head close to the lip of the ledge. With an easy, almost effortless motion, she lifted the man on her foot, using his own momentum as he sought to rise. Needing more power, she deliberately pushed back, turning her body over into the empty air above the canyon. The scout grunted in surprise and screamed as he and Watashi shot out over the canyon's edge, falling through the air. The sound came rushing to her ears as she fell, the sound of the women running. Distinctively, she could hear the patter of the little feet and children. She smiled, floating in the wind. Major Morrow looked down from his horse. Two broken figures lay near each other on the canyon's floor. One was his scout, the other a tiny, bloodied old woman with shrunken breasts, her hair spread silvered on the sand, incongruously beautifying the scene of the blood and death. Morrow sighed. After all these years, I shouldn't be surprised at them. Captain Byer beside him agreed. Disgusting, naked like an animal, by God. Morrow motioned to the dark clump of riders behind him. Better roll the body aside. The horses will shy at the blood. A lean figure dismounted. I'll take care of it, Major. The figure was buck-skinned. A sloppy cowboy hat shadowed his face. While Morrow and Byer watched, he laid a blanket over the body of Watashi with an awkward, courtly gesture. Kneeling beside her, he meticulously tucked the blanket beneath her before lifting her in his arms. Without a word, he passed Morrow and Byer, walking back down the canyon, carrying the tiny body with a tender attentiveness. Captain Byer spat. A hell of a man for chief of scouts. Major, Tom Horn is more Apache than a dang Apache. He's more Apache than the dadgum Apaches. Morrow grunted. I came to that conclusion a long time ago, Captain. The story was brought to Fort Thomas in San Carlos. All Apaches know it. How the running steps were given to the women and children. They do not name them. Apaches do not name dead bodies, for those bodies are no longer the identity of the spirit that was in them. But they remember there were 3 warriors who fought. They have not forgotten Watashi. The place is called the Canyon of the Three. End of chapter.